Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. We have a tremendous wrestling card for you today here on All-Star Championship Wrestling, which, of course, features the world's greatest wrestlers.
My little itty-bitty bruiser buddies.
United States heavyweight champion from Brazil. The world's heavyweight champion from the AWA, Nick Bockwinkel.
The Midwest supporting, bruiser loving, positivity spreading, world's most dangerous podcast. Join former pro wrestler and promoter Dave Dynasty as he supports and promotes Midwest pro wrestling. Keep on growing with the Midwest Express. This is the Dave Dynasty Show.
Greetings and welcome to the Dave Dynasty Show. I'm your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining us for another episode of your Midwest Wrestling Podcast. Midwest Wrestling Podcast. I got a little tongue-tied there. We got a unique episode for you this week. Usually we have interviews on with other people, but Ike and I both had a crazy week this week, and we really didn't get any interviews in. And I put out there on social media, people to ask me questions, and I do a Q&A. And inevitably, every time I do this, people always get with me and say, what is your story? How did you get involved in wrestling? What have you done in wrestling? Et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to take an episode, and I'm going to talk about my tale thus far. Hopefully you find it entertaining and interesting and not at all boring, but we'll see. I do hope you'll at least give it a chance and listen to it. I think I've done some stuff, and I've had a good time, and so on and so forth. Before we get into that, let's get our usual plugs. You go to powerslam.tv. They have some of the best streaming independent wrestling available. It's incredible. There's over 100 promotions on there, over 4,000 hours of content. And if you go and sign up today and use the promo code Dynasty, you get one free month. So check them out at powerslam.tv. On March 31st, check out Asylum Wrestling Revolution in Indianapolis. They got a big show featuring Drew Skills, Calvin Tankman, Apollo Star, Dale Patricks, and much, much more. I'm going to try to make it to that show, but you want to check them out. We gave out 10 pair of free tickets last week. We are going to do that again this week. We got 10 more pairs of free tickets from Asylum Wrestling Revolution. So check out social media, Dave Dynasty and the Dave Dynasty Show on Facebook and Twitter for information. First come, first serve. We're just giving them out, and we hope to see you there. You can definitely see me April 6th in Muncie for DCCW. Ike will be there with me once again, and we will be live streaming the event, doing commentary. So if you're not in the area and you cannot make it to Muncie, then be sure to check out the DCCW, the Delaware County Championship Wrestling Facebook page, as we live stream that event. It's a good time. We had fun doing it last show, and we've done a lot and developed a lot to make the live stream even better. So it'll be very, very cool. That show is headlined by an appearance by former member of the Powers of Pain and Faces of Fear, Warlord. He will be in attendance at that show. And then the weekend of June 8th and 9th, we will be in Milwaukee for Crusher Fest to see the unveiling of the Crusher statue there in Milwaukee. For more information on that, go to crusherfest.com. If you'd like me or Ike or both to attend your event in whatever capacity, or just to help promote and plug your event, if it fits our format and what we do here on the Dave Dynasty Show, we'll be happy to help out. So get in touch with us. We can help you give out tickets. We can help you plug your event. We will come be there at your event and do some coverage on social media. We can live stream. We can commentate. We can do all kinds of different things. So just reach out and contact me, and let's work something out. If you need any graphics help, flyers, social media banners, match graphics, whatever it may be, you also reach out to me. I'm a very affordable and quick option to help you out with that. So contact me for more information for that. So I said we're going to tell my story today, and we're going to do that in 3 parts. We're going to do the first part. We're going to talk a little, just briefly, about my childhood and kind of how I became who I am. The second part, we'll talk about my a very nutshell summary of how I got involved in wrestling and what I've done there. And then the third part will be just some philosophy, some vague, wrap it up, looking back type things. So let's start. I'm from Indiana, from Columbus, Indiana, born and raised here. And I first started watching wrestling when I was probably about 5 years old. My grandma was a wrestling fan, and she babysat me a lot, and I would watch with her, and I was hooked instantly when I saw these things and saw these matches on TV. We're in this unique spot where we live in kind of South Central Indiana, where we'd get wrestling out of Louisville. We'd get the Memphis stuff out of Louisville, and then we could get pick up some stuff that was on some stations there in the Cincinnati type area, different things that were there, and then of course we could get Indianapolis wrestling with Dick the Bruiser and all, and it was great. And while I know a lot of people say Bruiser stuff in the 80s was not quite up to par where it was before, and I would, to an extent, I would agree with that, but I still think there was a lot of great stuff there. And one cool thing about Bruiser's wrestling is he always showed a lot of old matches on his show. So I was seeing a lot of the classic stuff from the 60s and 70s on that weekly program. And then, like I said, I was getting the Louisville feed of the Memphis show. A little later, both my grandma and my parents got one of those big, huge satellite dishes in the backyard. And man, that opened up a whole world. I was getting all kinds of new stuff there all of a sudden. I was getting, AWA World Class on ESPN. I was picking up some other stuff, and it opened my eyes to Lucha Libre. We were getting some Spanish-speaking stations, and I saw Lucha Libre for the first time, and it really kind of blew my mind, and I became a Lucha fan from there on out. So that's how I kind of got started watching, and it was absolutely a love at first sight. I was enthralled by wrestling, and it is something that has been there my entire life. It is, no matter what it is, I've always had wrestling in my life. I've always collected stuff, anything. I would just digest anything. And of course, some things I liked more than others, but when I was a kid, I watched everything. And it was pretty remarkable. A lot of people fall out of wrestling, and then there were periods where maybe I didn't watch as much, but there was never a time when I didn't watch at all. There was a group of us in high school that watched, and back then when we were in high school, it wasn't really the cool thing. So we did kind of hide that a little. And we weren't going out and promoting that we were watching wrestling, but we were still very, very big fans and watching. And I've always watched to one degree or another. When I was young, I don't remember my first live wrestling show. It would have been in a little town called Edinburgh, Indiana, at the high school. My grandmother would have taken me, and it would have been Bruiser's group running. I don't really remember much specifically. I just remember being there. I haven't really looked up the date on what that would be. It'd be hard to pinpoint when it would be. Again, it would have been the late 70s, early 80s, when I was a child, and it would have been there. So I may have to look that up and try to get a little more information. But again, my grandmother took me, and man, she was so enthralled by it. She was so into it. She would yell and scream at people. She would yell and scream at the TV too. And that's one thing me and her really bonded on, and one of many things. But she was the one that really got my love of professional wrestling started. My dad watched to a degree at some point when he was younger, because he would often talk about wrestling in the area. And where we live here in Columbus, and for those of you who have been to Columbus or from Columbus will know, in Columbus, Indiana, right now on 25th Street, there's a mall, and it's barren. There's nothing there now, hardly there at all now. But on those grounds used to be the old fairgrounds here in the county. And that's where Bruiser ran in this area when he came through a lot. It was there at those fairgrounds. Actually, Bruiser and pre-Bruiser, even. And then we also had an armory downtown, which I believe now is some kind of apartments. And they did run there some. And then they also ran at the high school gym, which back then were just one high school, just Columbus High School. So there is some history of wrestling in this area coming through. And my dad, he did talk about it some. He's not originally from this area, but he moved here when he was kind of young. And he talked about it, but he wasn't really that into it at that time like my grandmother was. So, but I was your typical kid through the 80s, got into all those things, all the pop culture phenomenons of the time, all the different toys and cartoons, and I love Hanna-Barbera cartoon stuff. I love, the Transformers, the G.I. Joe, the Thundercats, all that stuff. And it is still stuff that I love to this day. I'm a huge Masters of the Universe fan even to this day. But then I've always been a very big reader. And enjoyed a lot of that. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan. I love those books. And that was all integral parts of my life and who I am. I've always had a very creative side. Always done a lot of writing and creative things, drawing, and different things like that in my life. And but again, I was a wrestling fan prior to the big WWE boom, and watched a lot of stuff. I remember seeing, like I said, the Memphis stuff out of Louisville. And of course, the mainstay was the Bruiser stuff out of Indianapolis. And then we would pick up other shows too. And then, like I said, eventually when we got the dish, I was watching the NWA stuff. And I always leaned towards the NWA stuff more than WWF. I did enjoy WWF to a degree, but I was a huge fan of the NWA and what they were doing. And obviously the 605 at Saturday nights was my church every week. And I loved watching that show. And even as a young guy, I always leaned towards the Hills. I always thought the Hills were more believable. I thought they were more relatable. And I just thought they were much cooler characters. And those are the guys that I always leaned towards. And my favorite wrestler of all time has always been Dick the Bruiser. Because, again, that's who I grew up watching. He was the big hero here. He would be on local television for all these different things and ads in the paper and everything else. But it was that same kind of token. He was very cool, right? He was a good guy a lot during those days. But he would go out and, use chairs and do whatever it takes. And he had that cool edge to him about that. Even though he was older at the time, he was still a badass in my eyes. So that's kind of my childhood and how I came to like wrestling and begin to watch wrestling. Again, I was fascinated by it in all aspects and totally enthralled and did everything I could. I would videotape anything I could get off TV. We actually had a beta and a VHS when they first came out, and I would rent stuff from the video store and actually make copies of it so I would have it to watch over and over again. I would, me and my friends, develop some different card type games. We did the play-by-mail games, the Imaginary Wrestling Association. We were all very much into that. I collected, every action figure and merchandise when they started to come out, magazines, everything in my life centered around wrestling. And, it's always been there ever since. It's never really retreated from my life. So it leads me up into kind of my teenage high school type years where I was still a fan, still watching. And, that became, as it began, my first step actually getting into wrestling. Actually, it was actually past high school years, just in my early 20s. So let me take a quick break. And when we come back, I'll talk about that, how I made that transition from fan into actually being somewhat of a part of wrestling in those days. So stick around. If you are looking for the best books, DVDs, and posters on classic wrestling nostalgia, then you want to visit crowbarpress.com. There are literally dozens of titles there, including biographies of the likes of Bruiser Brody, Ole Anderson, Ivan Koloff, and of course, Dick the Bruiser, as we've spoke about here on the Dave Dynasty Show. You want to visit crowbarpress.com for all of your classic wrestling nostalgia needs. Again, that is crowbarpress.com. All right, welcome back. This is Dave Dynasty, and now we're going to talk about how I got involved in professional wrestling. Like I said before the break, watched wrestling virtually my entire life. Became a fan through my grandmother, and I watched pretty much nonstop, everything I could. Then once I got to that point in my life where I could suddenly drive, right? When you're mobile yourself and you're not dependent on other people, it opens up a whole new world. And that world for me was independent wrestling and getting to attend shows and seeing what was out there, these smaller shows that you weren't seeing on TV. And this is for better or worse, because some of these shows were not very good. Some were, but to me, they all had bright points, right? And they were all fascinating to me because not only was I a fan of wrestling, but I just loved everything about it, right? The event, the spectacle, the nuts and bolts of how these things happened. So I started going to shows here in Indiana and Central Indiana, pretty much anything I could. And I saw a lot of people that later I'd work with, a lot of people I still know today, a couple of organizations that are still running today. And it was great. It opened up a whole new world to me. And from day one, my brain's always been wired to see things and think, there's this, but this is how I would do it. Or if I could, this is what I would do. Or if I was in that position, this is what I would do. And that's how I thought. And there actually still is a promotion here in my hometown called Hoosier Pro Wrestling. It's ran by Jerry Wilson. who was a photographer and now runs shows here and has ran them. Oh, wow. It's got to be 20 years, a little over 20 years now, because I'm approaching 19 years from when I first made an appearance. So it's got to be over 20 years now. And I started going to his shows, and I enjoyed them. And I saw lots of guys that some I was a little bit familiar with. I saw Bobo Brazil Jr., who I recognized and knew from TV as Calypso Jim. And this was all fascinating to me, right? And it was great. And, I started attending the shows, started talking to guys, and started talking to Jerry, and just saying stuff like, hey, I'd like to help. What can I do? And I started going earlier in the day and helping set up the ring and help set up chairs. And I would go out with him and help hang up flyers. And then that progressed to, hey, I'm creative, right? I can do this. Let me help you with the flyers. So I started making flyers. And this was kind of a creative passion of mine, which I still do now. But it was such a, I try to do creative things with it. And it was such a different world than doing them, though, because you literally had to take a legal-sized piece of paper and type up your stuff and format it, and then take actual pictures, and you had to use double-sided tape and different things, and then cut and place, and then run a Xerox. And they didn't Xerox real clear to begin with, because of technology at that time. But it was a whole different process, right? You couldn't do it digitally on the computer at that time. It had to be a lot of printing and cutting and pasting and so on and so forth. But I tried to be real creative with it, right? And then I told Jerry, hey, you ought to do a little program every month. And so I started doing that, right? And we started selling some advertising for these programs. But I wasn't content just to do a thing with a few pictures and like a card lineup. I envisioned all these magazines that I read as a child and all these newsletters and fanzines that I was participating in, because I kind of forgot to mention, I did a little tape trading when I was a kid, and I subscribed to some fanzines, and I was a WFIA member at the tail end of their thing, and I was an Observer subscriber very early on, and of course I read all the newsstand magazines and the After mags and the Kaiser mags and all these different things, and that's what I envisioned for this program, right? And doing it in just 8 to 10 pages, which was just a normal sheet folded and stapled. But I was trying to creative, right? And I'd write little stories to try to help the storylines going on, right? And I would do a Q&A with a wrestler every month and try to get a little feedback from them and let them develop their character. I would develop rankings and put in there, because I've always been a fan of rankings. I love rankings. That was one of my favorite part of the magazines. So this is what I did with these programs, right? I tried to give them a little meat and not just be something very simple. And they went over really well. And I actually still have a few of the old ones I did. And they were kind of popular, and I loved doing them. And I was always around, and I was doing this stuff and helping and whatever I could help with, working a merch table or whatever it might be. And one month Jerry's like, hey, you ever thought about managing? I'm like, well, yes and no. I have, but it was always this little bit of fear of taking that leap. I was involved, but I hadn't crossed that line yet, right? I guys would talk to me, and they would talk openly, but I wasn't one of them, so I didn't know how to make that step. And Jerry said, well, you've got that look, right? And he knew, and everybody knew from my time, that I was a huge Jim Cornette fan, and so we started talking about this plan of me coming in and saying that, hey, Jerry Wilson, does the same old thing all the time, and I'm going to take over HPW, and I'm going to do it the right way, right? I should be running the show, so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. And I I'd say modeled, but it's pretty much stole the majority of my content and my approach and my persona from Jim Cornette. And, and I sprinkled in healthy doses of Bobby Heenan and so on as well. But I make no bones that I'm a huge Cornette fan and always have been. And I've always been a fan of tag team wrestling, right? Another thing I kind of forgot to mention earlier, I always lean towards the heels, but I love tag teams, and I still do. And I wish there was a resurgence of tag team wrestling like it used to be, because I always loved tag team wrestling. Anyway, so, I started doing this, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I got to be able to do it well. So, right. So I need these guys to train me a little, right? So I would get in there with some guys before the shows, and it was always cool to me because I was getting in there with guys like Ronnie Vegas and Bubba Brazil Jr., Calypso Jim, and some of these guys, when they would come in and they'd come and get in the ring with me early, and they'd show me things, right? How to take a bump, how to run the ropes a little, how to sell, stuff like just some basic stuff, and we'd go over this so that I had a little bit of this foundation, because I didn't want to, if I was going to do it, I wanted to, to look decent. And so that's how I got, I was doing this stuff, and then on April 30th, 2000, I always remember, I made my first quote-unquote appearance, where I came out of the crowd, jumped up into the ring, and laid out my manifesto of how I should be running Hoosier Pro Wrestling, and how I should be running wrestling, and how I could do it better than Jerry Wilson, right? And he did this, and I think he took a cookie sheet from a fan and hit me over the head with it, right? I took my first bump ever right there on the spot. And I was scared to death, right, about this all. But it was so exhilarating and so great. And then the next month, it was on May 27th, 2000, I came back. And this time, though, I didn't come back alone. I came back with Psycho Sam Cody, which was a huge, huge thrill to me, because I knew who Sam was from watching him in the area. But I also knew that he was Igor Zatkov in the WWA and did that Russian gimmick. So it was so cool to me that I was getting to manage someone who I had watched on TV years before. And Sam was a great guy, right? And it was great to be around. But I will never forget, here I was dressed at the shirt and the tie. I had this money tie, I had money print all over it, and I was decked out, and I was ready to go, and we were there at the curtain, and I was getting ready to walk out. And Sam goes, "All right, kid, let's do this." And he goes, "Hey, by the way, when we walk out there, don't get too far ahead of me." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Well, I don't have my glasses on, and I want to make sure I can make it to the ring." And I thought, whoa, that's something else. Because I thought, this guy, Sam can't see, and he wants to make sure he gets free. So I thought, I got to chuckle out of that. But then there was, on that night, he wrestled this guy named Roy Presley, who did kind of a honky tonk man, Elvis type gimmick. And on that night, I had a guitar busted over my head. And again, it was exhilarating. I loved it all. And it was so much fun. The next month in June, I actually made my in-ring debut in a battle royal, right? It was kind of my repercussions of Jerry Wilson of, let's show this Weasley manager. And he put me in a battle royal. And I weaseled around and did this and ended up winning the thing by hook and crook. And I was off to the races, right? And I did this managing thing for a while and loved it. And had, the crowds were, obviously, they were in the hundreds, right? We're talking 100 to 300 people a show, depending on who was there and who was on. But it felt like a million sometimes when you're out there, and they would get hot. And, I had knives pulled on me and threatened, and I had stuff thrown at me, and I had, all that kind of stuff that you hear about, obviously on a much smaller scale, but it was exhilarating and I loved it. Well, and I continued doing this, and I continued to come in early and work out with some of the wrestlers and the guys that kept doing things, right? Kept learning stuff. And eventually these guys said, "Hey, you picked this up pretty well. Have you ever thought about actually wrestling?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, of course I have." So I did. I transitioned over, and we did the thing where, I kept getting forced into matches, but I kept, my guys would help me and help teach me, and I would persevere. And long story short, I ended up wrestling for quite a while, and for a few years, and doing these things. And, held some titles there in HPW and had a great time. Had some pretty good matches with some local guys and got to wrestle a few names. I remember the first one being Dutch Mantell, and I was so excited to wrestle Dutch, and it was fun. And just in those few minutes I wrestled Dutch, he taught me so much, about slowing down a little bit, because I was nervous, so I was wanting to go, right? I was just everything. My nerves were just ramped up. And he taught me about slowing down a little bit, and it really sunk in, and how much we got so much out of so little in that match, really, and it was great. And then I will always remember, I don't remember what year it was, somewhere around 2004, 2005. had a weekend where we had 2 or 3 shows here in the area, and I took a couple bad bumps. And I don't. They weren't really faults of my own, and I'm not going to call out anybody, but a few guys who were not really trained well and kind of messed up some things instead of letting me do my thing, and instead of protecting me in certain moves. Long story short, in the course of this weekend, I took 3 pretty bad bumps on the back of my head and neck. And ultimately, with that third one, I actually suffered what they call a stinger. Ended up finishing. It was the end of the match. Took the pinfall, went to the back, and when I came to, I was like, I didn't remember how I got there. I literally have 2-3 minutes worth of time that I do not remember at all. Still don't. And end up going to a doctor and finding out that I had compressed discs and I had some damage from these things. And the doctor, we're talking, it's a different time, right? This would be a major surgery for me. And the doctor said, well, since it's not really causing you a lot of pain yet, your choices are this: have the surgery, let's fix it now, or wait until it becomes more of an issue, and then you can fix it. But either way, either route I went, my wrestling was done. He advised me that it would be traumatic. If I continued, things could get much, much worse. So that's what I did. Everything was cut short. I had to hang it up. Did not want to, but I had to think big picture. But I chose to pass on the surgery and ended up having it, 15, 16 years later. And I now have 2 fused discs in my neck and a little metal plate and some screws. But the surgery was a lot easier at this stage of my life and this stage of time to have. But it ended up becoming unbearable. My arms would just go numb and everything else. So it was short lived. And like I said, ended up having the injury, which put the kibosh on it. But I stayed involved, right? I ultimately I ran some of my own shows in North Vernon, Indiana that did pretty well. The attendance was not great. The town had kind of been killed by some people, but I was trying to rebuild, right? And I was trying to draw in and get involved with things. And I think I could have got there, but we were running in this really, really nice church gym. And then just one day they called me and said, well, the church has decided professional wrestling is not the image we want, and they weren't going to rent to me anymore. So couldn't really find a building that I wanted there. So I quit running, but I kept going to shows. I kept sporadically doing things, doing ring announcing. And different things, and just being a part wherever I could. And then years later, getting with some guys, and I formed a promotion. It's Emerge Wrestling here in Columbus, and worked with them for a few years. Oh, okay. Well, let me back up here. Actually, kind of non-wrestling. Before I got back in it with Emerge, I did some things. Right, I had these dreams, and I have this great wife, this amazing wife who supports me in everything and helps me pursue my dreams. And, I have published, I have comic books. I'm a huge geek, right? And I love comic books and so on and so forth. And I've got published comic books and published that way. I've been a sports writer for the local newspaper, and these are all things I wanted to do. And my ultimate dream in my life was always to own my own comic book store. And we did that, right? And we were in this great position where my wife had a good enough job that she made enough money for home. So I was able to do this, right? My income didn't matter. We didn't need me to have an income. So I had a comic book store. I owned it here in Columbus and ran it. And it did well enough, right? Let's say it was not costing us money. It was not losing money. It was covering itself. There was a little bit of profit so that it could grow. And we were building it and growing it. It was doing well for us. We were on plan with what we wanted to do. And then my wife got sick, and there was lots of health issues. And they really all came on very, very quickly and got worse really, really quickly. And the point of the matter is she had to stop working. Well, suddenly I had to make money, right? I was not making money for home. I was just making money for the store. There was not enough to support the store and home both. So I had to close up the shop and actually get a job. There's no regrets and whatever else. But I got to live that dream. And then, like I said, years later, I got involved in Emerge Wrestling, and we were running shows and doing, obviously, they were still very successful. And I did that for a couple of years, and it just got to the point with my wife, she needed more time, right? She needed more attention. I couldn't have a divided stance. So I had to kind of pull out of Emerge and focus more on her. And that's when I started doing the podcast 2.5 years ago. And the great thing about that is I can do these interviews and I can record my podcast and do these things on my schedule, right? When I'm available and when it doesn't interfere with her health and other things. And I can be there and do both. So it's really, really great. It keeps me involved and keeps me present. And I can do it on my schedule. And of course, Ike Isaacs helps a lot with the interviews and does a lot of great stuff. And we're, like I said, I go to shows when I can, and I help out there in Muncie with DCCW and different things like that. And this is what I do, right? There's always the chance of me showing up and doing some managing and doing some ring announcing and doing some authority figure type things. That's always a potential. But right now, I love doing the podcast. I love talking to this, and I love preserving history of wrestling because that's always been my thing, man. I love the nuts and bolts and the numbers and the history and the stories and all these rich layers. So I love helping to preserve that and tell these stories and letting these guys tell those stories. So I feel like that's my role right now in wrestling, and I'm very happy and pleased with that, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. And because I get lots of involvement and good feedback, so I think you do. So. But we're going to take a quick break, and then I'll come back and I'll wrap this up, so stick around.
You've heard him here on the Dave Dynasty Show as a guest and as host of the monthly Graham's Gallery episodes, and now you can hear his stories. You can own a copy of Confessions of a Big-Time Wrestler, the audio book from Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., former multi-tag team champion in WWA and owner of Bruiser Bedlam. You can hear all of his encounters with the various wrestlers, places, and promotions he's worked as he tells about his colorful, long, and illustrious career. You can have your own copy for only $25, and that includes shipping and handling. It's very simple. Go on Facebook, look up Jerry Jaffe, Jaffe, send him a private message, and make arrangements to purchase a copy of Confessions of a Big-Time Wrestler now. You will not regret this purchase.
All right. So thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening to this episode. I know we have interviews with lots of people more important and relevant than me, but I appreciate you listening to my story, however meager and simple it is. I think it's important for me to give some perspective on what I see things. And a lot of people ask me about my philosophies on wrestling and my views, and here it is. I put this out there on Facebook, and it's what I believe. I believe people should support quality. If you're going to support somebody, and if you're going to be involved in wrestling or whatever it is, you should hold yourself to those standards too, of be well trained, right? Look professional, conduct yourself professionally and respectfully. If you want to get involved in wrestling, I don't believe. Here's the thing: I'm a huge baseball fan, right? I'm a huge St. Louis Cardinals fan. My entire life, I would have loved, to play first base for the St. Louis Cardinals. I played baseball as a kid. I worked at it. I hit the cages constantly. I trained. I practiced. I didn't have what it took, right? I didn't have the tools to do it as much as I wanted to, as much as that was my dream. I didn't have the tools to do it. I wanted to, I loved baseball so much. That's part of the reason I later wrote for sports, so that I could do some writing and covering high school sports and high school baseball. It's okay to come to the realization that no matter what you dream, that maybe your original dream is not going to become your reality. That doesn't mean you shouldn't dream. What it means is you should modify your dreams. And here's the deal. The odds of people making it WWE, or AEW, or even Ring of Honor stuff, it's tough, right? There's a lot of people out there striving. So set yourself out to be the biggest success that you can be in whatever it is, right? This is just about wrestling, but I think the same lessons apply to whatever. If you choose to be a wrestler, here's the deal. Know what your role in the business will be. If you want to compete in the ring, then set out to do it properly. Train. Lift weights. Get yourself fit and in shape and look like an athlete. Once you start to accomplish that, then that's a never-ending process, right? And once you accomplish that, go out and find a reputable school and be trained right by someone who has experience, by someone who is out for the best for you and the best for the business. Not someone who's just going to take your money and put you in a ring just to take your money from you. Not someone who's going to get you out there every so often and just wants to chop the hell out of you and bruise up your chest and say, well, you're just paying your dues. You know what? That's not what it is. Find someone, even if you got to drive, even if you have to sacrifice, even if you have to make the effort, go out there and find someone to train you properly and train you the right way. And then there are dues to be paid. There's dues to be paid in everything you do in life. So don't go out there and just take any booking. And I know I got a lot of feedback about that. A lot of people saying, well, yeah, you just want to get in the ring. No, you don't. Because you know what? I got in the ring, and I got in the ring with a couple guys that didn't know what they were doing, and now I have a fused neck. Don't do that, right? Don't just show up in someone's backyard in front of 5 people just so you can get in a ring with Joe Blow who has no training, right? Go to a decent show that's professionally ran and professionally done. Number one, is not going to be an embarrassment to be a part of. Number 2 is not going to be a black mark on you and your track record in your future. And number 3, who's not going to put you at risk with what you do. Now, what that may mean is for a while, you're going to be showing up at these shows and you're not going to be wrestling, right? But show up. Show up early. Help set up the ring. Help set up the chairs. Put in your time, but always have your gear bag with you, right? Because at some point, it's professional wrestling. Somebody's going to no-show. Someone's going to have a car trouble or whatever else. And then maybe you'll have an opportunity to step in and fill in. And when you do, maybe they can say, hey, well, that wasn't bad. Come back. Let's keep doing it. That's how you get your foot in the door, right? That's what you have to do. And I know it's easy to say, I'm just going to go wherever for whatever it may be, even if it's free, and just so I can get in the ring, get ring time. I don't think that's the best philosophy. Don't sell yourself short. You need to handle yourself as a brand, as a business, because you are. You, as whatever you do, is a small business. Conduct yourself as that and sell your product accordingly. Show what you bring to the business and what you bring to a show, and sell that to them, right? You have to sell yourself because you are the product, right? No one's just going to say, oh, yeah, okay, come and do it. Sell yourself, right? But like I said, beginning by looking professional, right? Looking like an athlete, having quality gear or a look or a gimmick. You got to look unique. And what I don't understand in this day and age is that there's so many guys out there, and they all look the same, right? There's so many guys that look the same and are trying to be this guy or trying to be like that guy and trying to do what that guy. Do something different. Set yourself apart because that's what makes you valuable, right? That's what gives you value. Don't be a cookie cutter, right? Don't do what the next guy does. Be unique. I miss that about wrestling. I miss uniqueness of characters and uniqueness of looks. And when everybody didn't just look identical. But find a way to give yourself value. And always do keep in mind, no matter what you pursue, sometimes you just don't get there. And that's life. That's okay. But what you do is you pick yourself up, and maybe you got to go down a different path. Maybe you got to go towards a different goal, but you just keep on trucking towards that, right? I set my goals out when I started in professional wrestling and wanted to be a part of this business to be the next Jim Cornette. That did not happen. And here I am, 19 years later, having the time of my life, doing a professional wrestling podcast about Midwest professional wrestling and its history. And I'm getting to talk to people that is astounding to me that I get to speak to them. I am in correspondence with people. I am texting with people. I am meeting with people. I am calling people friends that I never even imagined that I would ever even cross paths with. And it is remarkable. And even through this path, which is not the one I had intended, right? This is not where I thought I would be. But even still, I am making friends. I am meeting great new people. I am seeing wonderful new things. So just because it's a different path does not mean it's going to be a bad path. So just be willing to adapt. But no matter how you do it, no matter what path you got to go down, work hard because nothing comes easy, right? No matter what you do in life, you have to put in the time. You have to put in the effort because frankly, If you don't put in the time and the effort, and you don't work hard, you don't deserve it, right? You have to. You have to. You have to work and be willing to do that. Be willing to fail, because failing makes us strong, and failing is where we learn, right? You don't learn through success. You learn through your fails, and just brush yourself off and keep on keeping on. That's what I say every week when I end my show, and that's the reason why, because I'm a huge fan of the Rocky films. I love those movies, and that's what they always say, right? It's not about how many times you get punched or how many times you punch the other guy, and it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you pick yourself up and keep moving forward. So there's going to be setbacks, right? There's going to be injuries. There's going to be canceled bookings. There's going to be all kinds of things that's going to get in the way, and that's okay, right? Just keep on keeping on, and be willing to adapt and be willing to work hard. And I try to preach positivity, and there are times I'm a grump, right? I really am, and I'm very critical of the modern product, and this and that, and that's okay. All right, it's cool, but I try to be positive with people, right? And I try to be positive with how I go day to day with whatever I do. So just know, man, it doesn't mean you're a failure to realize that, we're not all cut out to be a TV wrestling superstar. It's not going to happen, right? It's just not possible. And that's not what we're all made for. And we're not all made to get to the top of the mountain where we would like to be. But we can all be pretty good on whatever point in that mountain we get to, if you do it the right way. And you can still be a part of something pretty incredible, because this business is amazing from top to bottom. There is amazing stuff at every level and every step of the way. So be a part of that, and be part of the amazing part of this business. And always remember to pass on what you learn and what you do. Pass it on to the next guy and help them out, right? Be that hand. If you're going to take a trip, if you've got to a certain level and you're taking a trip somewhere and a car ride, you got a seat empty, man. Put it out there, right? I love it when I see guys that do that. There's so many guys here in the Midwest that do that, and that put their wisdom out there on social media for other guys to learn from, and are open up their cars to guys to ride with. But I don't want to hear anybody complain online or anywhere else that, man, they don't get any breaks, or man, they don't get any opportunities, or man, they just can't seem to get anywhere, when you're not taking advantage of the opportunities that are there, right? When someone says, hey, we got a seat left in our car, we're heading to wherever, Anytown, USA, and you don't step up and take that seat, you don't have any right to complain when you don't make it there in the end. So, again, it's okay to fail. It's okay to be disappointed. Just keep on keeping on. Keep working hard. Thank you for joining me this week. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for listening to me when I get in my soapbox. I'm very passionate about these things. Hopefully this was somewhat entertaining to you. I don't know, maybe not, but you know what? It was good on my part to talk about it and get it out there, and I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you listening every week, and I appreciate you supporting. Remember, you can go to ProWrestlingTees.com/The Dave Dynasty and buy our shirts to help us out. You can go to PayPal.me/The Dave Dynasty, make a one-time contribution to the show, or you can go to Patreon.com/The Dave Dynasty and make ongoing contributions. We appreciate that. That all helps keep the show rolling and free. And again, this week's show was not intended to be this, right? We had some interviews set up. Things came up. We had to change things. It didn't work out the way we wanted. Hey, it's all right. I kept on, and I adapted, and I kept moving, and this is what we got. And then so be it. That's cool. But we will be back next week, hopefully with some great interviews, because we do have some guys to talk to that's going to be spectacular. So we will be back next week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of the Midwest Express here at the Dave Dynasty Show in this movement. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, comment on our social media. That's one thing that's kind of a little bit frustrating. Some of our things here recently, some things we put out there and people aren't responding, right? Guys, come on. I need you to interact and work with me on everything, right? Not just certain things here and there, but I really need you guys to be involved and give me feedback and give me some chat and to help support the show and keep it free, right? It's not cheap. It's not free. So don't be afraid to throw a couple bucks our way and help us out. So anyway, until next week, I am Dave Dynasty. This is the Dave Dynasty Show. Thank you for listening. And until next episode, be good, be safe, and most importantly, keep on growing.